Awesome. Well, thank you, folks. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Gowdy, President and CEO of the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, and welcome to the first in what we're planning is three sessions that deal with some of the struggles we're facing with the pandemic and with mental health particularly. I think we were just talking off this session about our role, and what I see our role in the community is to be able to provide the platform that I'm lucky enough to be able to work with every day to partners, and be able to focus on some important issues that we're facing as a community, and go find the partners that the experts, subject matter experts in those areas, and bring them to the table. So we're really happy to kind of kick off with today's session. Our first session in partnership with our friends at the Youth Services Bureau, Life Interrupted, Understanding and Supporting Young People During Unprecedented Times. And as I was talking a little earlier, I have older kids, so I'm not completely attuned to some of the pressures that people have faced over the last year or so. I hear about it a little bit on the periphery through some of our employees and some of the struggles that they're having with some of the things that they're facing at home. Uncertainty, social isolation, parental stress are all things that are having a important negative impact on our youth. Social distancing, canceled activities, online learning, remote work, lockdowns have all been part of our last year. And these, have negative impacts on the disrupting impact on the daily lives of our youth and of our families. Routines are upside down. Lack of socialization, I think, has led to much anxiety amongst our young people. We know that overall mental health has worsened over the pandemic, and I think there's more to come as we kind of hit our bumpy road through the rest of this pandemic and what lies for us on the other side. We're in the business of sports and entertainment, and particularly through our sports, we understand that the role that physical activity and physical fitness and being active has on people. It's got a huge positive impact, and probably most so through our youth. And we started a foundation, OSEG Foundation, back in 2017, aimed at youth and aimed at figuring out how we can help create positive outcomes for children and youth, particularly with mental health challenges, through community investment and programs that we offer directly and offer through partners. A couple of examples I'll give you. We partnered with CHIO this winter to offer a winter wellness program where we introduce youth to winter sports. Partnered with Support Our Troops to offer mental health programs for children and youth of military families. And we're launching a program with our Red Blacks football team, a youth sport mentorship program where we team up our players with youth, particularly in racialized parts of our community. As I mentioned, I think unfortunately coming out of this pandemic, it's going to be bumpy, and we're going to face years of damage that this pandemic has caused as we kind of navigate our way to whatever normal is going to look like going forward. So let me turn it over to the stars of our show. Susan, you're our host for today. I'm going to read from my notes here so I get your brief bio right, Susan. Susan is the producer and host of Sharing with Susan B., which is on YouTube, as I understand. You spent 15 years in media at the Ottawa Business Journal, organizing and emceeing some of the city's most prestigious business events. You have a passion for storytelling from the heart, and you are authentic and a strong advocate for mental health and wellness. So Susan, I believe you're going to introduce our guests, and I thank you so much for participating with us and doing this for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for being with us today. We have over 50 people here online joining us, which I think is a testament to the need out there for this kind of information. I'm super honored to be here and part of this important conversation today. So I wanted to say on behalf of the speakers that I'll introduce shortly from the Youth Services Bureau, YSB for short, we wanted to thank the team at OSEG for giving us this opportunity to support you, those of you watching and listening out there that are tuning in today. And there will be a recording later that you can view if you're not able to join us today. And most importantly, to support the young people in our lives. This is like a virtual lunch and learn session, and we're connecting on a topic that's very important, and it's about youth mental wellness. Now, we all know we've been challenged. We're in very challenging times, and with this recent lockdown, it's even more pressure. And each of us is very aware of how we're feeling most days, and we're all working through a lot. We're in this together. We need to remember that. There's no question that we're struggling, that youth is struggling. So for the next hour, I'd like to invite all of us to help each other by engaging, asking questions. There's a chat format as well, so feel free to ask questions. We'll be answering them as much as we can during this session. And the one thing that we really want everyone to take away today is, from today's session, is that there is strength in reaching out for help, not weakness, strength. It takes a lot of courage. I want to show you my t-shirt. Vulnerability is power. And that's a fact. It has not only the power, it takes courage to be vulnerable, but when you reach out, it not only helps you, but it helps other people. And there's a lot of power in that. And these words serve to remind us that we're all human and that we all need support at times. And so do the young people in our lives. And remember that courage is a muscle, so flex it, practice. And before I introduce our guests today, I want to mention that we have someone from YSB, as I mentioned earlier, active in the chat box session here on Zoom. So if you have any questions, let us know, write it in the chat section. And if we don't get to all the questions today, we'll be posting responses in the next coming days on the YSB's Facebook page. So please follow us there. We'll also be posting contact information for YSB. We'll be hearing from Michelle all the great services that are out there and available. So let's get started. Let me introduce you guys to our two guests today. Michelle Earle, who is a mental health coordinator with YSB, and Anne Leslie, who's a parent and a mental health advocate and a YSB ambassador. So let's start with you, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us from YSB. I know a bit later you're going to share some tips on supporting youth during these very challenging times. Can you tell us a little bit more for those of us listening in that don't quite know everything about YSB, more about you and your particular role there?
For sure. So again, I just want to thank you for having me be a part of today's hour. So Youth Services Bureau, YSB for short, is actually in our 61st year of supporting young people and their families in all areas of mental health, shelter and housing, employment and justice services. So my role at YSB, as you mentioned, is one of the coordinators in mental health services in supporting youth and families. And at YSB, we have a mental health virtual walk-in clinic. We also have counseling services and a crisis line and chat services. So just so you're aware, to access our crisis line, the number is 613-260-2360, which I'm sure will be posted afterwards as well. And our chat services, which you can access at chat.ysb.ca. You can also book in a walk-in session by calling 613-562-3004. And I should also mention that our services are free of charge and are fluently bilingual.
Oh, that's great. Wow. You must be busy. I heard that, Michelle, that you recently spoke about the differences between mental health and mental illness. Can you share that with us?
Right. So just to kind of give us some quick definitions of the difference between the two. So mental health is an important part of everyone's health. And when you have good mental health, you can cope better with the stresses in our lives. And when you have poor mental health, you might have a harder time dealing with some of those stresses and how you feel about yourself. And mental health challenges changes just like our physical health can. So it's important not to ignore any of our signals or our problems that we're having. And even if you're diagnosed with a mental illnesses are treatable. Bad days are part of being human. We all have them. And everyone will have a bad day, a low day, or even a bad week at times. And during the pandemic, it feels like they can even be bad months. And so it's normal to feel low and stressed or even anxious when we experience conflict or disappointment, loss, or any other sort of upsetting situations. And so I'm just going to offer you just a few things that you can do to maintain good mental health, such as, getting enough sleep, trying to have a good sleep routine, making time for yourself, really trying to schedule out some times during the day that you can actually find the things that bring you joy and do those things for yourself. Be active. I know during the shutdown, that's a little bit more challenging. But there are some things that you can do even at home. Like there are many free videos on how you can be active even in your own home, doing some exercises or some yoga, just some sort of meditation exercise. Really be aware of managing your stress. And again, like I was mentioning, find things that bring you joy and happiness and fulfillment. Eating well. Eating is important. Stay connected with your friends and family. Visits right now may be limited, but there's always the phone, there's texting, and even doing what we're doing today in this sort of platform is using Zoom. And most importantly, again, like the message that we said initially was being able to ask for help. I think that's really important, that if you find yourself that you're struggling, is that to reach out to either someone that is in your community, whether that be a family member, a clergy, or someone that you work with, or a service provider such as YSB. And there's also some really great resources run by parents such as Pleo that are also very accessible. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, it's very helpful. Thank you so much, Michelle. And some of these tips, YouTube, tune into you. I do Qigong. It's a meditative energy. You can look for anything on YouTube. So we all have to make the effort for ourselves, right? And some days that's hard. It's my understanding too, Michelle, that as I said earlier, you must be very busy, but the parents and caregivers out there have been accessing YSB's crisis phone line in staggering numbers, which is understandable. So I'm just going to pause here for a moment to say to the audience out there that the issues that teens and parents are discussing and facing right now are very serious. And we'll be mentioning topics such as suicide, should that be a trigger for anyone listening today. Michelle, the word unprecedented seems to be overused now, but these are unpredictable times, nothing that we've ever experienced before. I feel the dial's been turned up and the intensity is very high, and you can feel it almost everywhere. What are some of the concerns that you and your team are hearing, especially right now with the continuing pandemic and now another lockdown?
Right. And I agree. These are really challenging times. And there has been an increase in isolation, an increase in worries and loneliness. People are isolating themselves for either having lack of supports or not reaching out for help. I also kind of call it the COVID fatigue. People are experiencing that. Mm-hmm. There are financial insecurities that families are facing and challenging in accessing basic needs. Some of our services are not functioning at the full capacity as they once were. And so that is also having an impact on youth and families. There's a disruption in routines and in seeing family and friends. We don't have those frequent gatherings, even over Easter dinner. We don't have those sort of celebrations or those get-togethers as often as we used to. And we're also seeing that youth are worried about their grades and their future. And I'll share some statistics with you that we are seeing in our community, just to kind of give you a perspective. During the pandemic, YSB and other mental health services have seen an increase about 30 to 40% of our crisis calls and chat sessions from youth and families. So that really is a quite high percentage. We're also seeing double the number of calls because of worries of suicide. CHEO, for example, their eating disorder clinic is seeing a 63% increase in patients. Wow. And so that's very concerning. Another stat is, 1 in youth are struggling with mental health, yet 1 in 6 of those will actually reach out for help. So that's just to sort of paint you a picture that, there is an increase of youth and families who are struggling and are really trying to access services.
Those stats are staggering, frightening. Remember, vulnerability is power. Reach out, speak to somebody, share, connect. Thanks so much, Michelle. That was quite a pattern interrupt for me to hear some of those statistics. It's courageous and powerful in so many ways to reach out and share, as I mentioned earlier. I also actually shared on Bell Let's Talk Day in January of a struggle, a trauma, a personal trauma that led to depression, anxiety, PTSD for myself. And it was shocking how many people reached out, not only on the post, but privately, and shared and said that that's the first time they've talked to anybody about it, but it was because I had shared. That's the power, right? Because I had shared, it was cathartic for me, but it was also helpful to hundreds of people. I was just overwhelmed by the response. So I wanted to share that. I wanted to mention that YSB also hosts several virtual youth and family health events. And the series is called Your Mind Matters. I love that title. It's so true. Your mind does matter. And the next event's on May 6th. So in the evening, and I encourage you to follow YSB on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for the details on that. Let me introduce our next guest, Anne Leslie. Anne is a lifelong Ottawa resident and a mother of 4 children. Bless your heart, Anne. She's dedicated to supporting her community through volunteer and community involvement. She has a personal experience with YSB's programs and is a very strong supporter of their work, including being a speaker at events like this. Anne is a seasoned human resource professional as well. And most recently, she's focusing on diversity, inclusion, mental health, and wellness, very important topics. Thank you for being with us here today, Anne, and sharing a parent's perspective, which is so key on youth mental wellness. And I'm curious, because I haven't heard your story yet, on where the passion is coming from about personal and family mental health and wellness. Got to unmute.
There always has to be somebody, right?
Yeah, there you are.
Me, the quiet one. I just wanted to say that it's an absolute honor to be here today, and it's a privilege to speak about the Youth Services Bureau. My passion with respect to youth mental health and wellness comes from, I guess, lived experience as a mother, as a family. I feel that, stigma, the desire to portray yourself in a certain fashion, in a certain manner, becomes very important to folks, and we tend to not ask for help when we need help. And we find ourselves in situations when we need help, we're not sure to whom we should turn to get that help we need. So that's a little bit about where my passion comes from, the desire to remind people that it's okay to ask for help, that when you do ask for help, it's a sign of strength and not a sign of weakness. It's an opportunity to be able to advocate for your family, for your youth. And Youth Services Bureau has been instrumental in getting me to where I am today, to be able to stand or sit in my living room and share some of the personal experiences. A lot of what Michelle was speaking about, it seems very, I want to say far-fetched, but it's not. That's not the word that I'm trying to say. Is it seems like it may be difficult to actually achieve some of the things that you were mentioning, and some of them sometimes seem very basic. But you mentioned the importance of good nutrition, the importance of good sleep, and these are all very important. But if you practice that, you can find yourself in a situation like the one I'm in now, where I know where to go to for help. I know how to access resources. I'm able to share that information with people around me, and I'm able to practice some of what Michelle was talking about.
You've given us so much to think about here, both Michelle and Anne. And it can be difficult to do some of these things. Reaching out for help is kind of the first step to whomever that may be. I myself was hospitalized for a couple of weeks because I had kind of let it go. And that was the turning point for me. And I was able to get the help that I need. Michelle, I have a couple questions I think would be helpful to guide parents who are listening and with us today. I think when we hear Youth Services Bureau or YSB's crisis services, we wonder, do we always have to be in a crisis to reach out for support on their phone line or their chat service? So that's kind of one of the questions that I had. The other is maybe that you could share 2 or 3 things that we can do to start a conversation with a young person in order to find out what they really need from us.
Right. So, so in terms of accessing our crisis line, we actually encourage youth and families to reach out to us before a crisis is actually happening. So to kind of view our crisis line in a way of an extra extension of support. So, you can give them a call if you needed to bounce ideas off of, or if you needed some resources in the community, or if you felt something that was brewing and you needed to get some professional help. That would be the most ideal time to access our crisis line, because you're in a state where you can actually absorb what's being suggested. And when you're in a crisis mode, you're on high alert. It's about what can we do now and fast. And it helps during the moment. But if we're looking at doing things as a preventative measure, it gets you ready. And it could also it could avoid a crisis from happening, and to be able to talk about what's going on. So to kind of see our crisis line as that, it's an additional extension of support, for any kind of questions or just as a sounding board as parents, because we all have them as youth and families. We have these questions that we sometimes we don't know who to turn to, which is, how you can access our crisis line. So the other thing you were wondering about is, how to start that conversation. And, I think it's really important that we ask, some open-ended questions. Things like, what do you need most right now from me? It could also be, how can I help you? So really try and ask those questions that engage a response other than yes or no, or I'm fine. Even just the question around, how are you managing? Can you tell me some examples of how that's happening for you right now? The other thing is to validate feelings. Just being an adolescent, you have different emotions happening all the time. And with the pandemic, everything is sort of amplified. And so, if you have, if you're seeing that your youth is very high, has really high anxiety, is just to, to validate their feelings and to, to let them know that it's, it's okay not to be okay. And then I know that this is a really rough time for you. And so to really sit with that, with your youth, really try and listen and hear what they're saying before you kind of get into what are we going to do about it. So just kind of really keep that really curious ear of what's happening. There's also, to kind of also to think of things of what you can continue to do in your home to encourage that normalcy. So it could be doing a theme night for dinner. It can be having baking, having these bake-offs, having a movie night, just things that can encourage that family connection, especially during these times. Those are, some ways that can increase communication, but as well as that connection, so that we're still trying to function as normal as we can as a family and finding a little bit of joy in these really challenging times.
For sure. Would you say also that, the adults and the parents in the household are not void of their own struggles, right? During these times, struggling with their youth, with their own issues, right? I have an older daughter, but she struggled with anxiety and depression in her younger years. And I wasn't at a stage in my life, this is way before the times we're in now, but I couldn't really relate. Now I can, having been through some things. Would you say, and Anne, please jump in on this, if you feel the same, do you think it's helpful to share as an adult with your young people, how you're feeling, that, it sort of, it supports the fact that we're not alone. We're all struggling, and I think in teens and young people, they tend to isolate themselves. They tend to be afraid to share their feelings. Just throwing it out there. Anne?
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think as parents, we have a responsibility to set the tone and to lead by example. And I really make a conscious effort to do that. So when I'm not feeling 100%, I let them know. Half the battle is knowing myself well enough to know that I'm not feeling 100% and looking for those signs. And, am I feeling a little bit unbalanced? Do I need more rest? Do I need to take a step back? So I try to share with my kids, even though they're grown, that I'm not feeling that great today, and I create an opportunity for a dialogue whenever I can. I'm there. I listen to what they have to say. I don't always know how to respond, and sometimes no response is really the way to go at that time. But I try to ensure that they have the support that they need. So the listening ear, I can turn them to the resources in the community if they need them. But sometimes just talking about, how they're feeling and the frustration and their anxiety. Kids are at, different places. And I think of the kids that are transitioning from middle school to high school, those transitioning from high school to university or college. Things are not being done the way we've done them in the past, and that has a tremendous impact on them. Kids that are graduating from university and transitioning into the workforce, well, what does that look like? I have a child who recently graduated from university and has started her very first job. That looks very different than when I started my first job. There were people there to hold my hand and help me navigate the different systems. They don't necessarily have that. So they're becoming, extremely resourceful. So I try to, when I wake up in the morning, and I do this very consciously, I put both feet down on the floor at the same time and I say, okay, it's a day. Let's see what today has in store. Because with mental wellness, you need to, you kind of need to gauge where you're at in a particular moment. And I find that I'm going to start the day on my, solidly on my 2 feet and, face what's ahead.
I have a couple of friends who we say, so where's your mental health today on a scale of 1 to 10? We check in with each other. Yeah, we check in with each other on a regular basis. And again, what you're talking about is, you know, what we're all talking about is communication is key, you know, and leading as parents, more mature adults, leading the way and demonstrating that, not just lip service, but actually doing it, right? Mm-hmm. That's really key. So that's very helpful. I'm sure you have lots of tips. Anything else that you can share with us that would be helpful to our audience today?
I wonder oh, sorry, go ahead, Anne.
I just wanted to talk about stigma, and maybe you're going to get into the stigma. That's something that I think that needs to be addressed, and we need to talk about mental health, mental wellness, our well-being openly. And you know, because it does encourage people to do the same thing. So if you create that atmosphere around you whereby people feel comfortable opening up to you, you can make a difference in one person's life. And when you talked about my passion for mental health earlier, I didn't really get into the my story. But what I do want to say is that the opportunity to be here today, speaking to you about mental health, is largely due to the services that we've been provided through the Youth Services Bureau, because as a family, we've accessed many of their services. And I assure you that I have always felt heard, validated, respected. And it's been actually empowering to have a conversation with one of the counselors at the Youth Services Bureau. So I owe a huge amount of gratitude to you. And you know, we sometimes think Youth Services Bureau, like, what is the full gamut of all the offerings that you have? And one that I'd like to just quickly touch on is the employment, you know, the youth employment program that you have. And my daughter was able to benefit from in-class training, learning how to prepare her resume, learning how to market herself, learning how to present herself at an interview. And that was all through Youth Services Bureau. So there's the helplines, and the chat is very important, and the virtual drop-ins now. Those are all super helpful, but there's so much more. And thank you, Michelle, for the work that you do.
Well, thank you for that, Anne. With some of the conversations that you were just having, it just had me think too about, you know, so often I can also just relate in my own program that I coordinate, is that parents are kind of being pulled in all these different directions now. And you know, there is that sort of lack of routine. And I think that just as much as we're trying to support youth around their own mental wellness, and as you mentioned, is just to be able to have those open conversations with our young people about how we're feeling, I think at the same time is that we also need to take care of ourselves. You know, we also need to give ourselves that self-compassion that we try and give to our you know, our youth. So, you know, we always hear about, you know, making sure that, you know, we always have to fill up our tank. And I think, you know, even as a mom myself, I think sometimes we, you know, we're always trying to make sure that our kids are okay, is that we lose sight of if we're okay. Mm-hmm. And when we do take time for ourselves, sometimes we kind of feel like a little bit selfish in doing that. And I don't think there's anything selfish in finding the time to be able to do something for yourself, because that's one, is that you're role modeling, and that you're finding some good activities that are helpful. But as well as that you're giving yourself enough energy to sort of face what's coming your way, you know. So at the same time, I just wanted to add, and just to sort of validate that, you know, that parents also need to be able to find that time for themselves to decompress and look after themselves.
I think it's something we hear a lot of. We know the analogy of the oxygen mask. Right. Place it on yourself first so that you can help others. And that's so key. I know, Anne, you have a very important, and one of the important lessons that you learned from your own story that I really like. Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So you're...
Yeah, it really does resonate with me, because I find that, again, it speaks to the stigma, right? Everybody has this persona that they're trying to portray, that they have their life together and everything is going their way, and they're that, as a mom, like I'm like a super mom, a superwoman. And years ago, someone described me that way. And at the time I thought, well, that's a really great compliment. I'm like a super mom, wow. And I think it was because I had all these kids running around, but at the time, I was really flattered by that. But now I see it a little bit differently, because I don't want to be a super mom, because I'm not a super mom. I'm a human being. I have needs. I need to take care of myself so that I can take care of the people around me. So I am going to reach out for help when I need it. I am going to talk about how awesome Youth Services Bureau is and has been and continues to be for my family every chance I get, because if one person hears me speak and knows that I've had success with these programs, then maybe they're going to pick up the phone and make that call as well.
100%. That's a fact. I know that for sure. I know somebody listening right now, the fact that 50 people registered, to participate in this call says something. And there are going to be many people who I think are going to be inspired by what's being shared today and reach out. I think this pandemic has taught us, there's always been a stigma around mental health. It's pre-pandemic, it's been around, and there's a lot of organizations doing some great work. And I think this pandemic has made it a little more okay to talk about it, because people don't feel alone. People know that everybody's struggling in some way during these times. So there's a little silver lining there. If it encourages people to speak up and speak out and reach out, then that's a good thing. I love that those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. Really think about that. I love it. This has really been an important conversation. And we do have some time here, but I hope those of you that have joined today feel in some way that you're encouraged, inspired, and know that there's help out there. And please remember that YSB is always here to listen and to help. And as Michelle so eloquently spoke about, in terms of taking care of ourselves as parents, we have to remember to do that. It's a good lesson to teach our kids and others around us, because I've found as a parent that kids don't listen to what we say. They watch what we do. Monkey see, monkey do. So let's be conscious of that. Do it for ourselves first and demonstrate to them what true strength is. And like physical health, we all have mental health, right? You'll find all the details on the work that YSB does on their website, ysb.ca, pretty easy to remember, so connect to that. And you'll see all the options there that are available. There's also an opportunity to donate and support the work that YSB is doing. You can see that on the website, a donate button. And I want to kind of open it up here. Mark, you're still on mute, but feel free to participate in this conversation as well. I know we were talking earlier that you've had, your own personal experience, and the fact that OSEG is putting this kind of content out there, I think is really important. And do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I'll just, I'm looking forward to going on the YSB website. I don't know why, I guess, Michelle, my bias that, that was for other people and kind of the struggles that I was facing in my life. It almost felt like if I was accessing those resources or going looking for them, I was taking it away from somebody else. So I'd like to kind of understand kind of what, who the resources are available for, and some of the programs, which it's shocking to me that you haven't reached out and kind of went looking for them before now, or haven't been pointed that way. So that's my learning for today. Susan, there's a couple of questions on the Q&A. Do you want me to read those, and you can be a jump ball in terms of who feels inspired to answer them?
Let me take a look here and see what we got. Oh, I like this one. Can you speak to the concept of toxic positivity and how to be sure as we as parents don't fall into that trap? Also, how to help our kids filter those messages out from others. I just want to remind everybody that we're personally not mental health professionals, but we'll do our best to answer that. Anybody want to take a crack at that one? Positivity.
Right. So I'm not really, if I'm understanding toxic positivity, would that mean that we're constantly saying everything is going to be okay? I'm wondering if that's what it is.
I think so.
Okay, so what are the impacts of that? Is that what the question is? Sorry, around that.
Well, how to be sure that parents don't fall into that trap and how we can help our kids filter those messages out from others.
Right. So I think just it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that we need to acknowledge that these are challenging times, and we are going to have these days where we're not going to be okay, and not everything is going to be okay right now. So there is some reality there as well. I think we need to let our youth know about that. And in terms of the messages that were being given from, I guess, outsourcing or from the community, I think it's important as parents, if I'm understanding the question correctly, so you'll have to let me know, is that, again, I think it goes back to having that open dialogue with our young people about what it is that they're hearing in the community, and just to kind of have an open conversation around that. And one of the things I think Anne had mentioned as well that I really agree on is that, as parents, we're not always going to have the answers to things, and we don't have to jump in right away to say, or to think that we have to have those answers. That it might mean that we have to just sort of sit with it for a little while. So I'm hoping that answers the question. If not, I apologize, and we can go back to it.
Yeah, well, feel free, the person that asked that question, to jump in if it's been fully answered for you. There is a sense that there are people out there that have this kind of positive default, mindset out there, and that has its place. But we also have to deal with reality. And I think what some of the things that you shared earlier, Michelle, to how to engage the youth in conversation or open-ended questions are very helpful in regards to that question as well. Another question that was asked, and I just want to say there's no silly questions, but is there an age limit for which the services YSB are available to people out there? Is there an age limit?
Right. So our services start at the age of 12 and they go all the way up into their 20s. And so I think I think what would be most helpful is that you visit our website to look at a program that you might be interested in. And there it will be clearly identified as to what age we go up to. So, and if we don't have what you're looking for, again, you can always give us a call, and then we can look together what's available in the community.
Do you have any recommendations, Anne-Marie asks, for children 10 and 11 years old?
Well, we have Crossroads, who are, some of the experts with younger children. So if a family was calling in, that would probably be where, depending on what the needs are. I mean, I don't know the exact circumstances of what they're looking for, but if you do have young people who are under the age of 12, I certainly would reach out to Crossroads. I do know that they have a walk-in, and they also offer counseling services. And so that probably would be a starting point.
And Henrietta just jumped in and said that in terms of the toxic positivity question, that yes, it was very helpful. So thank you. And I think that we answered this a little bit, Lena, but she was asking about, why are so many kids having more poor mental health? you did touch on some things earlier, Michelle, but are you seeing stronger themes than others, like not being able to go to school, friends, parent-child relationships?
Definitely there's there's that break in seeing their peers. And we know that when we're young adults or adolescents, that our peers are very important to us. And so there's that social aspect that they've been so accustomed to that for some is non-existent. So that is having a huge impact, and again, that speaks to feeling isolated, and it increases anxiety and sadness and even depression. We know even ourselves is that we have friends that we reach out to, and when they're not there, we are feeling an increase in isolation. So all of that has been heightened. Change your routines. I think we had also talked just a little bit about, when high school students are graduating, there isn't that ceremony that there used to be, that celebration, that, looking for that dress or that tuxedo or that whole event, and, getting pictures.
The drive-bys aren't quite the same, right?
Right. So that's a huge loss. Kids have been going to school for many years and really looking forward to that, that end of that point in their life and moving on. It's the same thing with university. I have a son too, who's spent about 4.5 years in university, and he's graduating, in a few months. And, that whole ceremony of getting up on stage and getting your diploma is not there, so it's almost like a grieving process too, about I've lost that piece that, I was really, really wanting to. And it's also a grieving process for parents. I know for myself too, is that I would really like to be there to cheer him and but again, as a family, I have to make up my own celebration. We have to do something in our home to acknowledge,
That's a really good point. Loss can be many things. Not just a loss of a life, but routine, self-esteem, connection. I think that we're all feeling that. I haven't celebrated a holiday with my family since December 2019. So, we're all in this together. Anne?
I was just going to add another emotion that a lot of, well, not a lot, but the kids that I've spoken with are feeling right now is guilt. Even when, for example, they were able to go out and they were able to go to, let's say, a patio or a restaurant, there was guilt associated with being in that environment. Maybe I shouldn't be here. What if I do something wrong? I should probably just stay home. And so the tendency was to further withdraw, and rather than actually put themselves out there and put themselves at risk of doing something wrong. Yes, I'm allowed to be in a restaurant, but I don't feel right being here.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that. There's so much going on right now. It's hard. But what's the good news is there's a lot of things like this out there, that OSEG's providing, YSB as their Your Mind Matters series. There's a lot of things that we can plug into, we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep making those strides in our own lives and not necessarily relying on others, because it takes that personal effort to reach out, to share. The conversation can be started, but I, as a participant, have to play too, right? It's a team effort, right, Mark?
Yeah. And then Susan, let me touch on something we talked about before we started, which is social media. And I see one of the participants asked that question. Michelle, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing with regard to social media, and it's probably been heightened during COVID. But what are you seeing in terms of some of the negative impacts of social media on our youth? And do you have any tips for parents in terms of what they should be? How they should be controlling, or what limits they should be setting for their kids?
I think even before the pandemic came, there was a concern around how much or how the impacts of social media had on youth. You know, there's this pressures of what you're supposed to be like or what you're supposed to look like, that really has a negative impact on youth of trying to fit into something that is unrealistic. You know, how I kind of see social media even being heightened now is that because feelings are so heightened, people may not be maybe the most kindest on social media, that, you know, the responses may not be as gentle, because they're also going through some tough times. And so I think as parents, and again, it's very individual, depends on how often and how much and the sites that your youth is going on. But it's just as you would want to be curious around where your youth is going out in the community, I think it's also important that as a parent, you're aware of where your youth is going on social media. And there's no guilt in looking and, you know, trying to find out what it is that your youth is looking at, because I think that's also what a parent's responsibility is, because there's so many sites that, you know, that are, I'm just going to say they're dangerous to some youth. And we can get into a whole different topic around that. But, you know, I guess my message is just that, again, as you would monitor where your youth is going, because you'd be interested and you want to be responsible in knowing where they're going and who they're with, is that you would also do the same with social media.
Paying attention, right?
Right.
That's key. Nancy has asked, when we get through this pandemic, pray, what do you think will be most important for us to do for our kids to help them regain their mental health? Does anybody have any input on that?
That's a very good question. I'm certainly not a mental health expert, but I think from a parent's perspective, it would be to do more of what we're doing now, in the sense that we're providing them with support. We're trying to be as authentic as we possibly can be. We're listening to their concerns. And I think we will need to slowly integrate, you know, once we're able to, and sort of reintegrate ourselves into what it is that's important to us and where we want to invest our energy. And maybe it's, you know, it could be an opportunity to do things differently. You know, there's an increased emphasis on the importance of physical activity, and perhaps some people were doing less physical activity before and more now. Is that something that they're going to want to continue doing? So it will be interesting to see how we reintegrate and how we build up our confidence, because people will come at this new reality differently. Some will be a little bit more apprehensive. Others will welcome the opportunity to socialize with open arms, and you know, that's something that they've been missing. So it'll be, you know, we'll need to be mindful of how others are reacting to the changes that have taken place, and to be sort of monitoring and judging, or gauging is probably a better word, what another person's comfort zone is with respect to the reintegration. You know, if you go running out and you see someone you haven't seen in ages and throw your arms around them and give them a great big hug, they may not feel comfortable with that. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but it will be interesting.
And I think it's a really great point that you're making is we're developing habits right now, right? Having to deal that we perhaps didn't have before, skill sets, you know, to deal with our youth, to deal with our own issues. And those, you know, we're building a toolbox and that we can carry forward, that just improves our communication with our children, with our friends, with our spouse. I think we're all learning that slowly through this, that communicating and being open and talking about feelings, which sometimes aren't so easy, right, Mark? Picking on the guy in the group.
You're picking on the male of the group.
Yes. You're our token male here. But, you know, it's not always easy. You know, it's not always easy. And I think this has been these times have really, are really encouraging us to do that, because without these conversations, we're putting ourselves and others at risk.
Yeah, and Susan, you talked about habits. I think there's probably, again, as the non-expert in this field as well, a lot of negative habits that have been kind of developed through this last year with kids as well. And I think some kids will adapt really well, but breaking a habit is not easy. And I think that's, you know, the role we're going to have as parents is to, you know, to help them through that bad habit and get back and rejoin the real world when they have that opportunity. That's not easy.
No, that's a really good point. Anybody else have anything to share before we wrap up? I don't know if we have, I think we've answered everybody's questions so far that have continued to ask. We will be sharing this session online, the recording. So hopefully it'll reach more people and continue to engage with YSB. Any final words, Anne?
I think the last thing I would like to say is that it's important that we emphasize kindness. We need to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves the space that we need. We also need to be kind to those around us and to be, to recognize, you know, when someone may be struggling, when they may need space, and give them the support that they need. But a little kindness goes a long way. That's my motto.
It's cool to be kind.
Yeah.
That's another t-shirt, another day. Well, thank you.
Sorry, if I can just leave with that, just one last thing too. It just had me think throughout this conversation is just, you know, in hearing from parents that when they are feeling, you know, if they are feeling isolated or they're feeling, you know, they've got some challenges happening that they don't want to bother their friend or they don't want to bother anybody. I often find what's helpful is that, you know, if you were to ask that parent, you know, if your best friend knew how much you were struggling, what would they say to you in that you didn't let them know how much you were struggling? Like, what would they say? And most often we'd hear back, well, they would say like, why didn't you tell me? I would have been there for you. And so it's just a nice example of that, you know, people want to help. You know, it's something that we, you know, it's just something that we have in all of us, and people are kind, and people, if they can, they will help. And if they can't help, they'll find the help. So to really, you know, if you need to reach out to someone, you know, just understand that it's, you know, that they may have had a time too when they've had to reach out, and to kind of, you know, just to be able to take that risk and just say that you need a little bit of help.
It gives them an opportunity to serve, to give. You know, it fills them up. You know, it's not that we're doing it to necessarily help them, but remember that we all inherently as human beings want to help each other. You know, we don't do anything alone, if you think about it. So remember, vulnerability is power, and the power to transform your own life, to make a change in somebody else's life. I thank everybody that's participated today in the chat and asked some very important questions that helped the conversation here. And again, that was what we put forward at the beginning, to take this hour and engage with each other to make a difference. The intention is to inspire all of us to be more, do more, have more, create more, serve more, help more. Thank you, Michelle and Mark. We're really grateful to OSEG for making this possible today, and the work that Youth Services Bureau is doing, and what Anne has been able to share in terms of her experience with that. I hope it's been helpful. Keep engaging with us on social media, follow us, and look for the future events that YSB is putting out there for everybody, and OSEG as well. I know you've got some coming up, right, Mark?
Yeah, and from our perspective, I think we're looking to do two things: get the conversation started around these subjects, and start providing some tools. And I think we accomplished that today. So I thank you to all of you for doing that. Thank you to our friends from YSB for putting this together. We have a couple. We have next week, we're talking about depression and anxiety and the importance of sleep with our friends from the Royal Ottawa. And the week after that, we're talking about something different, financial health during COVID with our friends from TD Wealth. So I appreciate your time very much, and I wish you all the best as we kind of fight our way through the rest of this.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.